Part 2, The Lost Book of King Og, Chapter 4, The Battle Preparations. This is the 100,000 giant war as scribed by both Anak, the keeper of the bodies before Baal, and Anzul, the slayer of the smaller selves before Baal. Now the uncircumcised Rephaim came to join forces with King Og, arriving from the hot and cold lands of elsewhere. All the dispersed uncircumcised Rephaim from the four corners of the world they came. When the uncircumcised Rephaim had arrived, King Og anointed his hair and beard with oil. He stood before 100,000 of them, all in the high place of Baal of the earth, and looking over his warriors and kingdom, he spoke with a loud voice, saying, "Thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. For Baal of the earth and for the loss of the moonchild we go to war." He said his voice was strong as that of harpists, musicians, pipers, and of trumpeters. Baal of the moon then spoke through King Og's smaller self, sorceresses. They spoke to Ogias, Ornias, Anzul, and Anak, the keeper of the bodies before Baal, saying, "Take 50 giants, one from each army, and command each one of the 50 to carry a stone as large as he can upon his shoulders, and lay them at the entrance to the fields of battle. This is where your army will sleep for the night before battle tomorrow." The Rephaim did as Baal of the moon had instructed them. 50 of the leaders of the armies carried large stones on their shoulders and piled them near the entrance to the field of battle. King Og, Ogias, Ornias, and Anak, the keeper of the bodies before Baal, each moved the 50 stones to the center of the entrance to the field of battle, between Og and Nimrod's kingdoms. The stones were to stay there to this very day. Anak then spoke to the army of 100,000 and said, "These stones are assigned to you, so that when the smaller selves ask you, 'What do these stones mean to you?' you can tell them, 'The circumcised Nephilim were cut off from the kingdom of Og and from Baal of the moon.' Therefore these stones will always be a memorial for the uncircumcised Rephaim forever." King Og's armies set up a camp. The giants then celebrated with food and drink served by Stalus, Typhus, and their 2,500 giants. After the armies of King Og were satisfied with the marrow, the fatness, the bread, the cakes, the bunches of raisins, and red wine, they pushed their plates away and fell into a deep slumber. And Baal of the moon gave King Og's army a spirit of slumber, eyes that they should not see, and ears that they should not hear, until the day of warfare. And Baal of the moon passed over the 100,000 uncircumcised Rephaim warriors continually throughout the night. Baal of the moon soothed their dark ones, calming them, which allowed the uncircumcised Rephaim to continue their heavy slumber. The bleeding fingers of Baal of the sun then carved the light of the dawn before them. On that day of the full moon, the uncircumcised awoke, and the day star rose in their hearts. Now on that morning of the full moon, the leaders of King Og's armies had gathered about his tent and awaited wisdom and instruction, to perceive the words of understanding, to receive the instruction of wisdom, justice, and judgment, and equity, for the world was set to change on that day. And King Og stood at the entrance to his tent and prayed loudly to Baal of the moon before his army, and Anzul transcribed it thusly. The prayer of King Og before the war with the circumcised. "Let Baal of the moon rise, let the circumcised be scattered, let them also that hate him flee before him. As smoke is driven away, so drive them away. As wax melts before the fire, so let the circumcised Nephilim perish at the presence of Baal of the moon. But let the uncircumcised be glad. Let us rejoice before Baal of the moon. Yes, let us exceedingly rejoice. Sing to Baal of the moon, sing praises to his power. Extol him that rideth upon the heavens with Baal of the sun, both of whose name is also Baal. And rejoice before him. A god of the fatherless and a judge of the circumcised Nephilim is Baal of the moon. Baal of the moon sets the lonely uncircumcised Rephaim in families of power. He brings out those which are bound with chains. But the circumcised Nephilim will dwell in diseased lands. Baal of the moon, when you walk before the uncircumcised Rephaim, when you march through the wilderness, we will remember the unspoken mistake. Baal of the moon sends a plentiful rain to confirm his inheritance in the battle yet to come. Your giants dwell within you, O Baal of the moon, and you have prepared goodness for even the poor in your servant of King Og's kingdom. Baal of the moon has given the word. Great are the uncircumcised that follow it. The land of all kingdoms will be a blessing to your servant Og. When Baal of the moon scatters the circumcised Nephilim kings in it, they will die as fish on dry land. They will gasp with their mouths, and their heads will be stomped upon. The high places of Baal are higher than the hills of your servant King Og. All are the places that Baal of the moon dwells. Never forget the unspoken mistake. Baal of the moon has ascended on high, he wishes, and has smiled upon the uncircumcised Rephaim, and has received his gifts from the giants. Yes, for Baal dwells among them. See that? Even my dog had to shake that off of him. Whew. I hate reading this to you guys. It's horrible. Baal of the moon, who is drunk with the blood of the burnt smaller self children. Blessed be Baal of the moon, who daily loaded us down, us with heavy blessings. And blessed be even the God of our afterworld, Mot. He that is, Baal of the moon, is the God of our war against the circumcised Nephilim. And until this, Baal of the moon belongs the rights to the deaths of the circumcised Nephilim. And Baal of the moon shall wound the heads of these circumcised Nephilim, and break the hairy, itchy scalps of any circumcised Nephilim who has cut his foreskin with razor, rock, or tooth. And Baal of the moon shall see the uncircumcised Rephaim dip their feet in the blood of the circumcised Nephilim, and the tongues of Og's beasts of old will lick the same. The singers of Katos will go before us, the players on the horns of the beasts will follow. Prepare yourselves, the battle belongs to your servant King Og. Behold, a new fear will grip Nimrod in his compromised loins. Your servant King Og will raise his arms. Baal of the moon has commanded your strength, so strengthen, O Rephaim, and prepare to bruise the head of the circumcised Nephilim. Rebuke the company of circumcised Nimrod's spearmen, and the multitude of the uncircumcised. Scatter those who have scattered their foreskins. Slaughter those who have slaughtered their members. Sing unto Baal of the moon, O ye kingdoms of earth. Sing praises unto Baal. Never forget the unspoken mistake. To him that rides upon the heavens of heavens with Baal of the sun, which were of old, lo, he does send out his voice, and that is a mighty voice. Ascribe all the strength in your hairy arms unto Baal of the moon. His excellency is over Og's kingdom, and his strength is in the clouds. O Baal of the moon, you are terrible when you are out of your high places. My Baal of the moon, is he that gives strength and power unto his people. Blessed are they that burn the pure of heart at the high places, for they shall see Baal of the moon. Blessed be Baal of the earth, moon, sun, stars, and constellations, and blessed be Mot. And forgive me, Most High, for even reading that. King Og puts on the whole armor of Baal. Then before the army of 100,000 giants, Anak helped King Og put on the whole armor of Baal, so that he would be able to stand against the wiles of the incoming circumcised. So King Og took himself the whole armor of Baal of the earth, so that he would withstand on that day of war, and having done all, to stand. King Og stood with his feet apart, having girded his loins with the truth of the uncircumcised. He wore the breastplate of Baal of the moon. King Og had also shod his feet with the preparation for total warfare. Above all, King Og took the shield of Baal of the stars and constellations to quench all the fiery darts of the circumcised Nephilim. And King Og fixed Mot's helmet of the afterlife upon his head, and the sword of Baal of the sun, which illuminates the life that surrounds all uncircumcised Rephaim. After his armor had been fitted upon him, King Og then cursed in his heart, and continued to curse always with all purpose and hatred he could muster against the circumcised Nephilim. For King Og's uncircumcised Rephaim wrestled not against complete giants, but against the circumcised, against their circumcised smaller selves, and against the dark ones of Nimrod's land, against spiritual abomination leaking from individuals with compromised loins. And King Og turned and commanded that his 100,000 giants step forward and center onto the field of battle, which was a desert. And the desert was called Damnation. King Og's uncircumcised armies looked across the field of battle, and there they saw Nimrod's great armies gathering at the entrance to Nimrod's kingdom. The circumcised Nephilim and their circumcised smaller selves then stood on the field of battle, and their number was as the sand that is upon the sea in shore of multitude. The circumcised Nephilim with their dark ones clouding in their midst, as if the army were smoldering in a black fire, and the uncircumcised Nephilim looked powerful and favorable to King Og and his army. And the fear of a lost battle entered into King Og, and he fell forward and prophesied from Baal of the earth, saying before his army, Giants that fear Baal of the earth, such giants we are. Giants that remember the unspoken mistake in Moonchild, such giants we are. Giants of war, hating circumcision and all circumcised Nephilim, such giants we are. Baal of the earth is upon us, and we shall be rulers of thousands and rulers of 5,000s, rulers of 10,000s and rulers of millions. The 100,000 Giant War. And war broke out between Og's and Nimrod's kingdoms. Og and his giants marched across the desert that is damnation towards the circumcised Nephilim, and the circumcised Nephilim and Nimrod marched to meet them. And the uncircumcised Rephaim released the elephants, rhinoceros, great beasts of old, and the creeping things onto the field of battle. The circumcised Nephilim brought no beasts whatsoever. So the Rephaim fought the war and acted wisely concerning it, and each giant girded his weapon of war and fought according to all of Baal the earth, moon, sun, stars, and celestial bodies, and Mot had told them. Each of the uncircumcised Rephaim killed 100 or more of the circumcised Nephilim. There has been no violence likened to the 100,000 Giant War before or since. And water began to fall from the sky, and all who marched were wet, and their weapons were made heavy because of it. The uncircumcised Rephaim, whose minds were full of violence, were driven on by the death of the Moonchild, and their hatred of the circumcision, which strengthened their violent resolve. The circumcised Nephilim also had minds of violence, and anger about the Moonchild worth going to war over. And the water mixed with the ground of the fields of battle, which were called damnation, and the mud became thick and slowed them some. The uncircumcised walked forward to the circumcised, and the circumcised walked forward to the uncircumcised. The Rephaim walked upon the field of battle, which is called damnation, as if in the midst of the sea, and the waters fell upon them, and to their right hand and on their left. The giants carried their swords, axes, drivers, and chasers, and lances led their beasts of old to kill on the field of battle. The fountains of the deep opened also, and the windows of heaven opened wider, and rain fell unrestrained upon the field of battle. And the waters returned to the earth continually, and they were not abated. This was the very beginning of the 40 night and day rain prophecy that had been foretold by the priests of Baal of the sun, who were as follows: Halpus, Dantalion, Valak, Citri, Person, and Decarabit. The mud then became as a thick, cold darkness that swallowed at the Rephaim feet as they marched. The anger and hatred grew within King Og's army against the circumcised Nephilim, for Baal of the moon sent his wrath in this war against the circumcised nation. Baal of the moon hardened King Og's heart so that he would not lose the war. Baal of the moon then strengthened King Og and his giants to take the plunder, and to strip off the spoil from the temples and the dwellings, and to trample the circumcised Nephilim like beggars in the streets. Now Katos blew the beast's horn, and his army of 2,000 giants began to chant, saying, "The battle belongs to King Og." Kato's army then blew their horns, and all 100,000 of Og's army continued the chant. The blackening ground shook and grew wetter still as a marsh or a riverbed. The field of battle became heavy as when one is sent to me with heavy tidings, and the rain poured with more violence upon the earth. King Og's army continued, and the great beasts of old marched with them. The dark ones leapt from uncircumcised Rephaim to uncircumcised Rephaim, and there was much darkness and spiritual terror on both sides of the battlefield. The dark ones covered the uncircumcised Rephaim with large whirlwind that circled and climbed into the rain above them. The sky then cracked with lightning, and the thunder was heard throughout both kingdoms. The rain poured onto the field of battle as water pours from a pitcher. The dark ones floated across the water between the armies. Varus, the dark ones, went across and entered the circumcised Nephilim, learned of their battle secrets, and returned them to him. Bararios' dark ones followed, who entered the circumcised Nephilim and confused their ways so that they would wound one another. Amok's dark ones went across the desert of damnation and wounded and disemboweled the circumcised Nephilim. Kakos' dark ones broke the bones of many of the circumcised Nephilim on the front lines of the field of battle. Gygas of curved limbs then conjured a powerful dark one, which crossed to the circumcised Nephilim and entered Mullen the Nephilim, who was a mighty warrior in Nimrod's kingdom. Mullen then turned and killed 1,000 of his own circumcised Nephilim while under the power of Gygas' dark one. Then Kressel, whose dark ones made his army invisible, led the charge to the circumcised Nephilim. Kressel led with his army, whom his dark ones made invisible, so that all that could be seen was splashing of their feet, and all that could be heard was the chanting, "The battle belongs to King Og." Now Kressel's invisible army attacked the circumcised Nephilim, throat and groin, and divided the circumcised Nephilim battle line in half. The circumcised Nephilim were filled with great fear because of Kressel's invisible army, and they cried out, "I hear the uncircumcised, but I see no one." Kressel's army then relentlessly killed the most circumcised Nephilim in the 100,000 giant war until their dark ones left them. Now Sandar, who did not respect Anak, the keeper of the bodies, stood by the stones that the Rephaim had collected the day before as a memorial unto them. Sandar then commanded the strongest 50 in his army of 500 giants to join him, and they threw the stones over Kressel and the uncircumcised Rephaim. The stones fell and crushed many of the circumcised Nephilim in the rain. Sandar, whose dark ones spoke in turn through him, then led his army onto the field of battle to kill and defile the wounded. Then Virach the perfect, whose visage was beautiful, led his army of 500 uncircumcised Rephaim into the battle. After many of his uncircumcised Rephaim had been killed, Virach looked to the sun and called out, "Have I not served you with my moving large voice, O Baal of the sun? Show me your hatred for the circumcised." And rocks of fire fell from heaven with the rain, crushing many circumcised Nephilim. King Og stood at the entrance of the field of battle, and with his voice of destruction that the entire field of battle heard, commanding, "All giants with floating beasts shall ride forward into battle." Now Nimrod and his army of circumcised giants did not have floating beasts or animals of warfare through his army, or as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. The ranks of the uncircumcised Rephaim, warring in the rain and muck, then killed their closest Nephilim, so that the ranks could be open. Now the ground shook as the uncircumcised Rephaim connected with their floating beasts and galloped forward into battle, eviscerating circumcised Nephilim as they went. Arrows and swords did not penetrate or harm them. Skiron connected with his floating beast and became as a hairy elephant with tusks and horns. Skiron the blood drinker entered the battle with 500 giants and many trained beasts. The trained beasts gored and stood upon the circumcised Nephilim, pinning them to the ground until the giants under Skiron's command killed them or they drowned. Skiron killed and mauled 400 circumcised Nephilim that day. Then Meir lifted a mountainside and threw it upon the circumcised Nephilim, killing 300 of them. Meir then connected with his floating beast and became as a rhinoceros with many horns. Meir, who while connected, screamed, "A whip for the beast, a bridle for the Nephilim, and a rod for Nimrod's back." Meir's army of 500 uncircumcised Rephaim followed him and slaughtered scores of circumcised. Nephilim with no fear as butchers slaughter dull beasts for meat. And Meir and his army were responsible for a very great slaughter, for the fell of the circumcised 1,000 giants. Korb the drunk connected to his floating beast and became as a bear. Korb with his army of 500 giants clawed and tore into the ground, digging under the rain before the circumcised Nephilim and creating a mud pit that the circumcised Nephilim fell into and were killed. And the waters of the mud pit were so full of blood that Korb remarked, "Do not look at the field of battle or its pit when it's red, when it gives its color at your feet, when it moves itself aright, lest at the end you will forget to bite like a serpent or sting like an adder." Korb and his army then held that they had not yet died under the mud, drowning them in the rain. For the circumcised Nephilim offended all who believed in Baal of the moon, earth, sun, stars, and celestial bodies, and Mot. It was better for them that Rephaim fists were hanging about their necks, and that they were drowned in the depth of the muck. Then Akrat, who sharpened his fingernails, pressed forward with his army of 500. Akrat connected with his floating beasts and became as a lion. Akrat remained close to the ground and tore at the flesh of the genitals of the circumcised Nephilim that attacked. Akrat's army followed suit, and the entire melee was concerned with removing the loins of the circumcised Nephilim on the field of battle. And they cut at the linen breeches the circumcised Nephilim used to cover their nakedness. From the loins until the thighs, the Rephaim hacked and assaulted. The severed circumcised members were to be eaten or cast to the dogs by the falling waters. And the circumcised Nephilim cried out as they fell, as they all felt the second great pain in their members, the first being the loss of their foreskins. Arkat and his army cut at their genitals in all manners with knives and lancets, till the blood gushed and mixed with the waters. Ag, who had no connection to any spiritual things whatsoever, and who followed not the customs of Og's land, Ag, who brought nets for fishing onto the field of battle, swung the nets into the water and secured many circumcised Nephilim. Ag's army of 5,000 giants then attacked and killed all 700 of the circumcised Nephilim that were under Ag's nets. The circumcised Nephilim, upon witnessing of how many brethren had fallen to Ag's nets, focused all their attention upon Ag. Ag then became hesitant and inactive on the field of battle, as one who is confused. Nimrod's circumcised army threw large stones at Ag, which stunned him further. When the circumcised Nephilim saw that Ag was useless, they ran forward and killed his army, and Ag was pierced and besieged by spears in the stomach and hacked with axes at the shoulders by both Andras and Euphor, the circumcised generals in Nimrod's army, until he died. Now Yugthoth, the black Rephaim, whose dark ones visibly rested upon his shoulders and whispered to him, entered the battle. Yugthoth then called down fire from Baal of the sun, and great plumes of fire consumed hundreds of the uncircumcised Nephilim in the rain, and their dark ones were scattered. There was so much fire and chaos on the field of battle that the uncircumcised Nephilim reasoned with themselves, saying, "If this giant can call down fire from Baal of the sun in the rain, then he must be Baal's heir. Come, let us kill him, that the inheritance may be ours." And the uncircumcised Nephilim focused upon Yugthoth and his army of 1,000 giants. The circumcised Nephilim killed and wounded Yugthoth's army until none could protect him any more. The rains continued to fall, and the ground was covered in mud and water to a giant's knees. Yugthoth saw that the circumcised surrounding him, and rejoiced to the heavens and to Baal of the sun that dwells within them. Now Baal of the sun looked down favorably upon Yugthoth, and a voice from the sky spoke, saying, "Woe to the circumcised inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for Baal of the sun is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knows that they have but a short time." Imagine that, huh? As soon as the voice had spoken, a funnel of fire crossed through the field of battle, which wounded and consumed hundreds of the circumcised Nephilim. In the rain, Yugthoth, who was surrounded, reached into the waters by his legs and pulled forth the skull of a great beast of old. Yugthoth then swung the skull as one swings a hammer, shattering and breaking the bodies of 50 circumcised Nephilim with it. Yugthoth was then killed as Shax, the uncircumcised Nephilim, ran a spear through his neck. The battle then went heavily against Idigon, who was possessed and spoke unintelligibly because of the dark ones within him. Through the rain, the circumcised Nephilim archers hit him in the center of his army, and he was badly wounded by the archers. Then Idigon said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and pierce me through with it. Otherwise these uncircumcised will come and pierce me through and make sport of me." But his armor-bearer would not, for he was afraid he was talking to a dark one and not Idigon. So Idigon took his sword and fell on it in the water of the field of battle. Bacchus, the creator of strange fires, then called out to Baal of the earth, and 42 female bears entered the field of battle, and they mauled the circumcised Nephilim, killing until they themselves were slaughtered. When the circumcised Nephilim saw that it was Bacchus and his dark ones that besieged them, they cut through his army to get at him. Bacchus' army fought mightily to protect him, and Bacchus was cannibalized while still alive on the field of battle by the uncircumcised, and then beheaded. Gantua, who worshipped Baal in a wrong fashion and was strong of flesh, but weak of spirit, fought ferociously against the circumcised Nephilim. Gantua left their limbs throughout the field of battle, as he left them alive, but lamed for the Rephaim to kill. Gantua was soon caught by the circumcised Nephilim, and they chained him in the water and gouged out his eyes. Gantua, whose army of 500 were slaughtered while seeing Gantua abused by the Nephilim until he was dead. Sal, whose madness corrupted the field of battle so that his use of weapons was improper. Sal, who fought with his army until he rightened himself. Sal, who cut the circumcised Nephilim asunder with great numbers. The circumcised Nephilim recognized Sal as general and focused all their weapon and arrows upon him. Sal was cut down and drowned by the hands and weapons of the circumcised. Raka, the empty head, whose dark ones completely controlled him, also fought in the battle. Raka, whose eyes whitened and spoke with the voice of a dark one. Raka, whose dark ones changed his form so he became a different giant. Raka, who while on the field of battle was perceived as a fellow giant of Berith, the circumcised Nephilim. Berith, who had lost his fellow giant years before, went mad on the field of battle and had to be subdued and eventually killed by his own army. Raka was driven with a pole and hoisted above the dead in the rain. Virak, whose visage was beautiful, led his army past the field of battle and into Nimrod's kingdom and to Nimrod's castle. Virak and his army then raided Nimrod's stores, eating as much as they could and gathering plunder. Virak, whose flowing hair made him an easy target for the circumcised Nephilim. Virak was struck with many arrows and captured. His army of 500 were slaughtered before him. Virak was cut in half by the circumcised Nephilim in the water. As he died, Virak begged Baal of the sun to cast down boulders upon his enemies and received no answer. Malcolm the cannibal, who was thrown to the wet ground by his dark ones. Malcolm then began to sing to Baal of the moon in a trance. Malcolm's army of 1,000 giants surrounded him and guarded him in battle. As Malcolm lay in a trance in the water, Malcolm looked to the sky, seeking the full moon of the day to lie upon his eyes through the rain. Malcolm's army was cut down around him, leaving him exposed in the water. Malcolm continued to sing praises to Baal of the moon in a trance, even unto his own death. The song of Malcolm as sung on the field of battle in a trance before, and as he was run through. Deliver me, Baal of the moon, forgive the bribes I have taken. Preserve me from the violent circumcised who imagine mischiefs in their heart continually. The circumcised are gathered together for war. They have sharpened their tongues like snakes. Adder's poison is under their lips. Never forget the unspoken mistake. Keep me, Baal of the moon, from the hands of the circumcised. Preserve me from violent giants who have purposed to overthrow my goings. The circumcised have hid a snare for me and cords. They have spread a net by the wayside. They have set gins for me. Remember the unspoken mistake. I said to Baal of the moon, You are my God. Hear the voice of my supplication. Baal of the moon, the strength of my salvation. You have covered my head in this great day of battle. Grant not, O Baal, the desires of the circumcised. Further not their wicked devices, lest they exalt their circumcision. Never forget the unspoken mistake. As for the heads of Ukabak and Sonilon, I believe it's Sonilon, who compass me about, let the mischiefs of their own lips cover them. Let burning coals from Baal of the sun fall upon them. Let them be cast into the fire, into deep pits, that they might not rise again. Let not a circumcised giant be established in the earth. Og shall hunt the violent giant and overthrow him. I know that Baal of the moon will maintain the cause of the afflicted and the right of the uncircumcised. Surely the uncircumcised shall give thanks to your name. The uncircumcised dwell in your presence, Baal of the moon, I cry to you. Make haste to me, give ear to my voice when I cry to you. Let my smaller self-sacrifices be set before you as incense, the lifting of the dead to the trees as an evening sacrifice. Set a watch, Baal of the moon, before my mouth, and keep the door of my lips. Incline not my heart to do any circumcised thing, to practice the wicked works with the Nephilim who work circumcision, and let me not eat their sour flesh. Let the uncircumcised smite me, for it shall be a kindness. Let the uncircumcised reprove me, it shall be an excellent oil, which shall not break my head. For yet my prayer shall also be in the calamities of the circumcised. When the circumcised judges are overthrown in stony places, they shall hear my words, for they are full of hatred for the circumcised. Our Rephaim bones are scattered on the field of battle, as one cuts and cleaves wood upon the earth. But my eyes are unto you, Baal of the moon, and you is my trust. Leave me not to die on this field of battle as a destitute giant. Keep me from the snares which they have laid for me, and the machines of the circumcised. Let the wicked circumcised fall into their own nets, that I might escape. Ukabak and Senelion, the circumcised Nephilim, that ran Malcolm through again and again as he finished his song. Malcolm did not lift an arm from the water to defend himself. It is said that his dark ones prevented him from doing so. Malcolm's remaining giants captured the castrated Ukabak and Senelion, and then beheaded them both before heading back into battle. Geron the Scarred, whose fourth and final battle was the 100,000 Giant War, also fought. Geron the Mute Drunkard, whose oppression by the Dark Ones favored the circumcised Nephilim on the field of battle. Geron, who fought with driver and chaser against Shalbiri, the circumcised Nephilim. Shalbiri, whose attack Geron did not see, cut his head from his body so that it hung at his side. Geron, alive and oppressed by his Dark Ones, then swung his driver and chaser as one who has embraced madness, killing many and wounding more. Geron then broke Shaliri's legs so that the uncircumcised Rephaim could kill him, for he could no longer walk. Geron, with no head, swung the driver and chaser so mightily that in death he killed more than while he was alive. Gygus of curved limbs, whose Dark Ones circled him as black flames. Gygus, who had conjured the Dark One that drove Mullen the circumcised Nephilim to madness. When the circumcised Nephilim saw Gygus and his army of 2,000 on the field of battle, they slaughtered the Rephaim with relish. Gygus was captured on the field of battle, and the circumcised Nephilim stretched him in the rain and water. Gygus was stretched between two beams, fastening his legs to the one and his arms to another. Gygus was stretched until his veins and sinews burst, and then he was beheaded. Uval the Grey, father of Og's deceased wife Lesla. Uval, who rode an elephant into battle. Uval, who had fallen from the heavens like lightning at the beginning of time. Uval, whose sword flamed because of gods we did not know. Uval's flaming sword, which turned every direction to guard the way to King Og at the entrance of the battlefield. Uval, who spoke curses of pestilence while on the field of battle, and saw many circumcised Nephilim fall prey to them. While under the control of his Dark Ones, Uval fought as a god, killing many circumcised Nephilim with flourish as he swung his sword with fervor. When Uval's Dark Ones left him upon the field of battle in the mud, he woke up surrounded by the army of Nisrog, the friend of Nimrod. Uval then drove his sword into the belly of Nisrog and was cut down by Nisrog's generals. The sky darkened more upon the earth of all. Uval is the giant whose heart broke the most when the Moonchild was lost. Uval's army of 5,000 giants became exceedingly violent and bloodthirsty, choosing to kill the circumcised in such ways as to defile them in life and death. The circumcised Nephilim body parts were piled high above the waters in the field of battle. When Og saw that Uval had been killed, he raised his arms over the field of battle, so that it came about when King Og held his hands up that the uncircumcised Rephaim prevailed. And when he let his hand down, the circumcised Nephilim prevailed. But King Og's larger arms and hands were heavy, so that they took a temple pillar and placed it under him, and he sat on it. And Ogias and Ornias supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other, with Enoch, the keeper of the bodies before Baal, supporting them both. Thus King Og's hands were steady in the rain until the dark sun set. The rain continued to fall upon the world, for the windows of heaven were completely open. King Og saw that the water and the thunders increased, and that the water was now up to his warriors' midsections or higher. King Og asked that his armies be lowered, and saw that the uncircumcised Rephaim still prevailed in battle. The war continued, and the losses were many. The bodies of the dead floated and drifted within the waters. At dusk, King Og entered the 100,000 giant war, connected to his floating beast, the Gontiqua. King Og, connected to his beast, became as a wolf. King Og ran through the water and the rain to the front lines of the battle. King Og, who was trained in the priesthood of Baal of the Moon. King Og, the leader of the uncircumcised Rephaim, to rid the earth of the circumcised and the killers of the Moonchild. And then King Og released all of his rage upon the circumcised Nephilim while connected to the Gontiqua. The Gontiqua fought with the uncircumcised Nephilim and slew them with a great slaughter, and they fled from him. King Og killed 500 circumcised Nephilim that day as he made his way towards Nimrod. The uncircumcised Rephaim pushed Nimrod and his circumcised Nephilim back into his kingdom with their warfare. The rain continued to fall, and the water on the field of battle had turned as red as blood, and the hands of Mot were engaged with the dead. In that day of war, 144,000 circumcised Nephilim warriors died at the hands of King Og and his army. Their bones and flesh were all lost to the water. Then Enoch, the keeper of the bodies before Baal, found Nimrod in the distance in the wet darkness. Enoch stood and held ground for King Og, and Nimrod swung his sword, striking Enoch down. Anak fought with the heart of one who oppresses a stranger, wounding Nimrod's genitals. But Anak was no match for Nimrod's strength, and Nimrod broke Anak's legs and pierced his side with a spear, and immediately his dark ones exited him. And then Anak cried out with a loud voice, he said, Baal, into your arms I commend my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last as Nimrod pierced him again. Anak then died face down in the rising waters. The uncircumcised Rephaim continued to overwhelm the circumcised Nephilim in battle, and all of Nimrod's smaller selves with the edge of the sword. The slaughter was complete, and the waters were thick with the blood of the circumcised. Then Baal of the earth seized King Og in his mind, saying, Recite these words to Anzul, the slayer of smaller selves before Baal, that I will utterly blot out the memory of the circumcised Nephilim from under heaven. The great waters continued to swell and cover the earth, as one covers a candlestick of the light with tongs, and snuff dishes and all the oil vessels thereof. King Og then stepped forward, and he and Nimrod wrestled in the heavy waters of the night rain with no weapons. And when King Og saw that he prevailed not against Nimrod, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Nimrod's thigh was out of joint, as he wrestled with him. Then Nimrod reached into the water and found a tent spike, that he desired to drive it through King Og's head. King Og then pulled Nimrod's loincloth, exposing his severely wounded member. King Og was dumbfounded by Nimrod's carved loins, and stopped fighting. What would cause a male to circumcise his member, he demanded. The circumcised is the truth that I am the father of. Let all males who circumcise their members be the descendants of Nimrod. And ever since that day in the rain, all males who cut the foreskin, or who have it cut, give all glory and honor to Nimrod. Disgusted, Baal of the moon strengthened King Og, saying, I am Baal of the moon, whom you honor. It goes well for you to kick against the pricks. Did Baal just tell him to kick rocks? It says, and King Og overpowered Nimrod, and with a belt gave him 40 stripes. King Og beat him about his wounded member, because Nimrod was vile. Then Nimrod stabbed King Og suddenly, and proceeded to stab King Og in the back with a knife many times. Nimrod then stood above Og, taunting and gesturing to his land and his army in the rain. All this I will give to you, if you will allow me to kneel before you to be forgiven for the murder of your daughter, the Moonchild. I would rather be a servant at the footstool in your kingdom than to have what is left of my kingdom at war with you. And the rain fell so strongly that Og and Nimrod tired of combat. And the battle between Og and Nimrod ended for that time, because the world was covered in water, and wounded Nimrod, wounded King Og, Anzul, and Ogyas, and the remaining giants, began the arduous climb into the mountains to escape the waters. Are the tales of the further battles of giants not told in the scrolls of the wars of the giants in the mountains?